Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the American Occupational Therapy Association's latest installment of their Practice Chat series, hosted by AOTA's Home and Community Health Special Interest section about inclusive design and the role of occupational therapy in public architecture. For those of you who are new to AOTA's Practice Chat series, welcome. And for those of you who have participated in previous Practice Chats, welcome back. On behalf of AOTA's Home and Community Health Special Interest section, my name is Michael Lopez, and thank you for joining us for what promises to be an inspiring and thought-provoking session. Tonight's conversation focuses on a powerful intersection, occupational therapy and the built environment. We'll be exploring how OT practitioners can influence inclusive design by bringing clinical expertise directly into the world of architecture and planning. From applying foundational models like the person environment occupation or PEO to collaborating with designers to ensure accessibility and equity, this session will offer valuable strategies and real-world examples to guide your own practice. We are honored to be joined by a distinguished guest whose work beautifully bridges these disciplines. Francisco Lasta leads inclusive design at GFT, an integrated architecture, engineering, and construction firm where he bridges occupational therapy and architecture to shape public spaces that support engagement, equity, and well-being. With a clinical background spanning pediatrics to aging adults, Francisco brings deep insight into how environments affect human experience across the lifespan. He has played a pivotal role in developing inclusive design guidelines for architects and collaborates with design teams on projects ranging from transit stations and airports to sensory rooms and restrooms. His work is grounded in occupation-centered thinking and emphasizes the power of design to support meaningful participation for people of all abilities and identities. In addition to his inclusive design work, Francisco also serves as a marketing communications specialist at GFT, a dual role that allows him to strategically amplify the impact of occupational therapy within the design industry. He actively promotes the value of OT through storytelling, thought leadership, and cross-disciplinary engagement. Francisco has presented at South by Southwest, AOTA Inspire, and the Universal Design Symposium. His previous talks include a neocon session on why OTs belong on inclusive design teams and a presentation for the American Institute of Architects Chicago on OT's role in shaping environments. At NeoCon 2025, he returned to co-lead a presentation titled Evolving Spaces, Sensory Rooms, highlighting how OTs and interior designers can collaborate to create purposeful, sensory supportive spaces. Francisco also leads GFT's Inclusive Design internship program, creating pathways for OT students to apply their skills in real-world design projects. He thrives on collaboration and is committed to building bridges between OTs and design professionals to create more inclusive, human-centered environments. It is truly a privilege to welcome someone who is not only advancing the field of inclusive design, but also creating real-world pathways for OT professionals to be at the table and in the room where design decisions are made. Please join me in welcoming today's speaker, Francisco Lasta.
Thank you so much, Michael, and hello, everyone. I am Francisco Lasa. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a Filipino man in my 40s with short black hair. I'm wearing a white shirt with a black floral prints. I'm an occupational therapy practitioner, as Michael just said, and I lead our inclusive design program at GFT, where I also serve as a marketing communication specialist. Thank you for joining this practice chat. Michael and I have been planning this since a couple of months ago before the AOTA conference. So I'm really glad that everyone's here who planned to be here, and I hope that you will learn something from this discussion, and feel free to ask questions related to our discussion this evening. So I'm going to share my screen right now. Let's see this. Okay, I guess that's already sharing my screen. Okay, just a little bit about the firm where I work in. GFD is an architecture, engineering, and construction firm that is focused on transportation, water, buildings, and power with over 5,000 team members across North America. And so architecture is a component of these different sectors, and we strive to integrate inclusive design principles to our projects as much as we can. So today we have four objectives, which is hopefully to understand our role as a consultant to architects and designers in different project phases. Also learn how our clinical insights and OT frameworks can translate to design. And also understand what is our status as occupational therapy practitioners in the design industry. How visible are we? And we'll also explore strategies for interdisciplinary collaboration to increase involvement in designing our built environment. All right, since we're going to talk about inclusive design, we need to talk about accessibility and universal design and how they relate to inclusive design. I get this question a lot by designers. What's the difference between accessibility and universal design and inclusive design? So this is how I usually would explain it to them. So when people think about accessibility, we have a built environment for the non-disabled, and we have a built environment for people with disabilities. And usually it's catered to wheelchair users. It's like separate environments. But when we think about universal design, then that's just one built environment for the non-disabled and people with disabilities. But still, it's focused on the built environment and focused on the dichotomy between non-disabled and people with disabilities. When we think about inclusive design, the term inclusive itself, it's a much broader scope, and it goes beyond the built environment. So it also involves not only people with disabilities or the non-disabled, but the wide range of users who will be using the space. And in addition to the actual, surfaces, the ramps, the railings, we look at technology that's being used, the services that are available to support the users using this space, what language is being used for information, instruction, any screen, touch screens that's there, is it accessible, what policies are in place, as well as the processes and also the schedule of how the space is being used, because those also affect the inclusivity of the space. But the ultimate goal is really increased participation in occupation, so that people will have well-being, because as OTs, that's our goal. That's why we're really equipped as OTs to get involved in inclusive design projects, because we have this unique lens that really considers all these important factors that affect the engagement of the different occupations that happen in a space. And if we look at this graphic, the OT domain and process, we look at all these different things, the occupations that happen in these contexts. We look at client factors, the performance skills, performance patterns, and we even have a process of doing that. We evaluate, we plan intervention, and we examine the outcomes if they're effective. And again, the ultimate goal is to achieve health, well-being, and participation in life through engagement in occupation. And we also have this model, I'm sure if you're an OT, you're familiar with this, which is we have this deep understanding of the transactional relationship between the person, the environment, and the occupation, and how these three elements influence each other. And when we think about inclusive design, it's really the context. But because we have understanding of all these other aspects of occupation, our understanding of this context is really so much deeper. So this is a graphic from Kilhofner's Model of Human Occupation, Theory and Application, 6th edition. You can really see here how we can break down context or environment in these granular forms. We have there the immediate, the local, and then the global context. Um, so we examine all these factors, and I'm not sure what other professions actually examine the context with this lens. So now we'll talk about our role in public architecture. So unlike direct services, which involve hands-on work with clients, um, we do consultation or indirect service. And these consultation efforts can involve a wide range of people involved in the projects. And consultation is more effective when there is buy-in, like when the client is already convinced that there is value in engaging occupational therapists in their project. And sometimes it also depends on the project type. There might be projects where inclusivity is not so much of a priority, although ideally, in an ideal world, we need to integrate inclusive design in almost all the things that we interact on a day-to-day basis. And that also depends on what the client's priorities are. So the the bulk of our discussion is really examining our role in the different phases of the project. So this is the typical design phases of a project from like even before you get to work on a project. That's why there's a project pursuit is when you're still pursuing the project, like you still don't have a project. So each of these phases, we will examine what our potential role is, and I will also show examples of my involvement in these design phases in different projects. So the first phase, this is not technically a phase because you don't have the project yet. This is when the firm is pursuing a project, like they want to work on that project, right? And they know that this project is gonna be built. Like the client wants to have this, let's say, playground or museum. They want it renovated or built from ground up. Um, that this is the before everything, before you start working on it, you need to first, as a design firm, win the project. And you can do that by submitting a proposal. Now, you can't just submit a proposal because usually the client will release what we call RFQ or release of or request for qualifications, which usually contains like a project overview, the client information, um, the requirements, their evaluation criteria. So in this phase, as OTs, we help the design team review the RFQ, and if there's potential for inclusive design for this project, then we can get involved with it. And once we we prepare the content of the RFQ, we review it with the team and submit it to the client. So once it gets submitted to the client, then the client would see, okay, which one of these teams are ideal for this project. And they would usually do a short list, which means if there are 10 uh, or more firms who submitted a proposal for this project, they see about 5 firms that have the potential. So they will contact those 5 firms and they will set a schedule to interview. So usually the interview is a presentation to like convince the client more why you're the best team to work on this project. So one example of this is that a couple of months ago, we were pursuing an inclusive design park. So the goal of the project is to identify existing parks across the state that is suitable for conversion into, inclusive design park. I think they only want one park to be converted into a universal design park. So they want to evaluate the current conditions of those parks that they have identified, and also have a design team envision possibilities to make one of the parks inclusive. So my role for this project, I was proposed as a team member, as an inclusive design specialist. So I highlighted my OT background and the relevant projects that I was involved in the past. I also researched the client, those parks that the client identified, and analyzed barriers in design opportunities, just to kind of have a feel of, okay, if we're going to have this project, what will be what are those challenges as well as the opportunities that we can highlight to the client. So I contributed to the content of the proposal, which is, again, the proposal is a response to that request for qualifications that the client released. And then I participated in the review process before submitting to the client, making sure that we are communicating the message that we have the perfect expertise for this project and you should give us a project. So that is before you even have the project. Now, once the client sees that, okay, you're the perfect team for this, we're going to give you this project. So you're awarded the project. So this is the pre-design and the programming phase. This is a part where the team figures out what needs to be built because the client is already, awarding them the project. Um, this is when you discuss with the team that includes the client, what the client wants to be able to do, what's their budget, what are their goals, what are the site conditions. So this is even before sketches and drawings. And the ultimate activity for this one is really just to understand clients' needs, the budget, and the vision. So our role here as OTs is to do more literature research based on the type of project that we're going to work on, as well as this is also a perfect time to educate the client on inclusive design, just in case they're not very familiar with it yet, and how we approach it. And also, this is a good time to think about, how we'll do user research, whether it's through observations or interviews of the people who will be using the space. And so the next phase, so once you have the programming phase, then we have the schematic phase. This is where you see like rough sketches and drawings, um, you know, uh, floor plans, elevations. This is when you get to see where the potential entries or exits are. You get to see the circulation, the flow, even the sunlight, the noise level, as well as where the furniture is going to be placed, as well as the fixtures. Also, this would give you an idea how wayfinding will be. So a case example of this is a college inclusive bathroom. The goal for this is that the client wants us to renovate bathrooms across 11 floors, and they want to convert one of the bathrooms, one gender segregated bathroom in an inclusive design into an inclusive design bathroom. So this is not a schematic um, drawing. This is the actual rendering of the project already. Uh, but this is where I got involved I was involved in the schematic part of this project. So I was an internal consultant. I collaborated with the design team. We looked at the layout. I also delved into examples of successful inclusive bathroom projects and shared it with the team. I conducted informal interviews with different types of users, and then I provided a recommendation on spatial configurations that balance access, dignity, and safety, because you could already kind of have an idea based on like what the layout of the project is. And then the next phase is the design development phase. This is where we have more involvement, and this is like um, this is when the design team refines the chosen concept that was started during the schematic phase with already detailed plans and sections. Um, and a lot of major decisions happen here. Major materials are picked. There's like detailed design drawings, and there's more accurate cost estimate. And our role here is to, ensure that the design features recommended during the previous phase are incorporated. the previous phase was the schematic design phase, and also explore opportunities to improve design. This is where we work with the design team to evaluate material and finish selections, just make sure that it is supportive of the people who will be using the space, whether it's the upholstery of the furniture or the floor, the wall, lighting. This is also where we can use our frames of reference, such as the biomechanical frames of reference, to evaluate counter and surface heights, reach ranges, clearances, lighting, wayfinding, cultural symbolism of imageries used. Um, an example that I have here is a sensory room. So the goal of the project is to refine an existing schematic plan to a fully coordinated design package, which will then be used as a basis for future sensory room design in similar facilities. So there's already an existing schematic plan, but we as a design team didn't really create it. Another firm or another architect created it. They have developed this schematic plan. They developed these guidelines. So our goal when we got the project is to develop the project more so that we can really get to a point where it's going to be ready to be built. So for this project, I led the research on sensory friendly furniture and interactive wall options. This was a great opportunity for our OT interns to get involved in the process, and I was so happy that this was a time when they also did their OTD capstone inclusive design internship with us. So that was really hopefully they learned a lot in assisting me with the research of the different materials and furnitures that we want to be able to recommend for the sensory room. So again, we provided feedback, the finishes, lighting. I discussed these design features with the interior designer, as well as our lighting designer. I also participated in acoustic planning discussions because they're asking like, what would be the ideal noise level in a sensory room? So usually when you're doing a sensory room, it's like usually 35 to 45 decibels. But you also don't want it to be like super, super quiet. But we want the room to really more of a respite for the people who will be using it, especially for a very busy facility. And I also attended weekly client meetings to discuss the progress of the project. And so these three other design phases, we don't really have a whole lot of involvement in these phases. The construction documentation is a highly technical phase where architects prepare everything a contractor needs to build a project. It involves like technical drawings, details, schedules, specs, permit-ready documents. And then the bidding is when the project goes out to contractors for pricing. This is when the architects answer questions from contractors about the design, and when the design team helps the client pick the right builder, just to make sure that the project will be executed. And it would be helpful if the contractor has an experience building similar inclusive design projects, so that they will know, what those details are that really need to be there. And then the next one is construction administration. This is when architects visit the site to confirm if the work matches the design, answer questions from the contractors, review if there are any substitutions or handle any changes, or make sure that if there are mistakes, they are addressed right away, and any other new issues. This is an important phase because if there are modifications during the actual construction that is different from your recommendation, then that would affect how the people using this space will experience it. If you choose a different material, or if there's a different configuration of the layout that might not be the most ideal based on what you recommended in the prior design phases, then you have to make sure that you know about it and provide your feedback as an OT. And then Lastly, there's post-occupancy evaluation, or POE. This phase examines how well the building meets the user needs after some period of use. Um, this is where we identify what works and what doesn't from the perspective of actual occupants. So in this phase, we can provide useful feedback to the design team for future projects and potential building modifications. So the photo here is our first inclusive design intern, Clarissa from Midwestern University. She was with our architecture designers. They're doing a kind of a post-occupancy evaluation for a train station using the tool that Clarissa developed as part of her OTD capstone project. So we're definitely able to contribute to the design of our public spaces. But the question is, why is this not happening more often? Why don't we see a lot of OTs, working in architecture firms or getting involved in the design of many of our public spaces? And an OT working in an architecture firm or in the design industry is still considered as an emerging practice setting, which comprises of just 1.5% of the different types of settings where OTs practice. A lot are in the clinical settings like hospitals or educational settings. This is as of 2022. This is from AOTA's website. And even home modifications, that's just 0.1% of the practice area. But that's because the traditional career pathways during our academic training is really clinically focused and are heavily oriented toward preparing graduates for roles in healthcare environments. And the licensing and credentialing requirements are also structured around clinical competencies, which can make non-clinical roles less visible or accessible to new graduates. When students take the NBCOT exam, a lot of the items are really clinical. So many OTs are not exposed to the design industry during their education or early in their early career. And they might not realize how their skills in human-centered problem solving, accessibility, inclusive design could be applied in design roles. This results in very few opportunities for OT students and design or architecture students to collaborate. And this lack of interdisciplinary collaboration would actually remain once they become occupational therapy practitioners and architects and designers, because they are unfamiliar with what each other can do to collaborate on a project. And there are also lack of established pathways for OTs to transition into design roles. But I'm happier now that there is more conversation about transitioning from clinical setting to a non-clinical setting. So that is, I think, gaining more momentum, which is really great, because it is how we could really optimize our potential as occupational therapy practitioners. Although our clinical knowledge is also our biggest strength when we are called to collaborate with designers. And we have to remember that. It's just a matter of adding more design knowledge to our training. That would really be helpful. And of course, the demand and employment opportunities are higher in the clinical setting. There's, the job security and compensation. There's more in the clinical setting. And OTs are just more familiar with the clinical environment. And because we're so focused on that, we're not in those environments where designers and architects are, which results in them not really knowing who we are or what we do. And that doesn't help when we want to start collaborating with them. Because in our training, if you see, again, going back to the PEO model, like in the clinical setting, usually, I mean, there is an acknowledgement of the importance of an environment, but we're so focused on the person and occupation. And sometimes the environment is missing. We just focus on developing the skills developing compensatory strategies. So how do we change that? Um, we need to embed design and architecture content in OT programs. We need to integrate coursework or modules on universal design, architecture, even user experience within OT curricula, because this can better prepare our OT graduates for non-clinical roles. Um, Also, interdisciplinary projects like those between OT and design students. I always encourage OT students to collaborate with architecture students on design projects, because those are really great opportunities to learn about each other and their contribution. And that would really expose them to each other's perspectives. I also think that we should offer continuing education and certification to provide OT practitioners with opportunities to gain training on, let's say, building construction, project management, building codes, and design principles, because this can bridge the knowledge gaps and make us more competitive in design teams. And we should promote non-clinical career pathways. Professional organizations and OT programs should actively promote the value of OT, um, expertise in design and architecture, and really highlight successful case studies and opportunities for collaboration. And it's important to establish interdisciplinary networks and partnerships early in their career. The photos that you see here are, again, our OT interns interacting with our architects and our design team, just to really understand, what the design team cares about and how they think. So additionally, we need to create forums, conferences, or online communities where OTs and design professionals can connect, share knowledge, and collaborate on projects, which can foster mutual understanding and open new career pathways. And guidance is important for career change. Offering resources such as mentorship, skill mapping, and resume workshops can help OTs identify and pursue opportunities in design-related fields. Encourage professional developments, really support OTs in acquiring new skills through workshops, certifications, programs. Design-related areas can facilitate smoother transition into these roles. I was so glad last AOTA conference that there were like more design continuing education. There were more design sessions. So I was so happy to be able to attend most of them. So the photo you see is, again, our intern tinkering with virtual reality to explore a building, which really makes a difference, because when you see a building in a three-dimensional space, you would be able to spot things that you might not be able to spot by just looking at a two-dimensional design. And then the photo at the bottom was just last week with my intern Vivian at the Merchandise Mart here in Chicago. We attended the NeoCon 2025. NeoCon is an international commercial interior design conference where a lot of designers from all over would come to Chicago and have really great discussions about design and the future of design, as well as different showcases of what's the future of interior design. And we need to highlight the unique value of OTs. Like, I've been working on really promoting our profession in the design field, such as AIA, South by Southwest, which is really mainstream, and again, NeoCon. And we need to conduct and disseminate research on OT contributions. We need to build a stronger evidence base for the impact of OT involvement in design projects, because this can help legitimize our role and really encourage more organization to include OTs in their teams. And it's important to showcase outcomes and success stories too. Sharing these case studies and testimonials from projects where OTs made a measurable difference can help shift perceptions and demonstrate the return on investment for design firms. Because a lot of times, return on investment is prime. And so that's it. I hope you've learned a little bit or something from sharing my experience as an OT in an architecture firm. I currently do not see the questions, but I'd be happy to answer those questions now. Michael?
Francisco, thank you so much. We have received a couple questions in the chat box. I will start. Michelle asked, are there any existing ACOTA standards directed at an introductory concept or level for universities?
I haven't explored that topic, but that would be interesting if there is one, or if there's none, maybe, that could be developed.
And Francisco, Odette asked, what recommendations do you have for a new grad OT looking to seek employment or collaborate with architecture or design firms, specifically in terms of how to approach these firms, advocate for the OT role, and identify projects where your OT input would be valuable?
So the easiest way to do that would be join LinkedIn. A lot of people underestimate the potential of LinkedIn. LinkedIn is still considered a part of our environment. And as OTs, we know how powerful the environment is, right? And LinkedIn is a virtual environment. And if we are not in that space where other professionals are, sharing their thoughts and ideas and their opinions, if we don't engage with them, like they won't know, who we are or what we can offer. So that would be like easiest, like to follow those thought leaders, like what they're talking about, what they care about, where the gap is. I think that is really important. Another thing that you could do is, be present in those spaces where these design professionals are. So one example, as I mentioned earlier, would be to participate in design conferences, and I'm sure there are local design events that happen in your area. The American Institute of Architects usually have local chapters. Same with the Organization for Interior Designers. They have these events in your area that you could participate. Some of them are even free. And those would be the perfect venue to start talking about OT. And especially if you're passionate about design, that really helps because you would be able to kind of communicate with them effectively. And being in those environments would also make you become familiar with the design language so that when you're communicating with them, like they get you because you are using their language. You speak the same language because you're familiar with it. Like you know what problem they want to solve and you know where you can come in to help them solve that problem.
Thank you, Francisco. And Odette also asked, what keywords or search terms would you recommend using when looking for job postings that align with OT roles in architecture, design, or related fields?
So this is where we talk about the status of our profession, right? It's still an emerging area of practice. There's not a lot of recognition yet about what we can do as OTs in the design industry. So it is difficult to find, even if you use all the available keywords out there, inclusive design, user experience, occupational therapy. If you do occupational therapy, you will just be led to those clinical jobs. So if you go to Indeed or even LinkedIn, it's really hard to find something that specifically requires an inclusive designer to be an occupational therapist. So it's really a matter of also doing your research, and visiting different websites of firms who you think might benefit from inclusive design. Uh, doing that research is going to be valuable, and knowing who works in those firms and connecting with them on LinkedIn, if they're active, like looking at what they care about and how you might be able to engage with them. If they're going to be in your city for a conference, you might also attend that conference and potentially interact with them if they're going to do a talk. So it's really like right now our status is really still emerging. There is already a recognition, which is really great. In fact, one of the books that was signed during NeoCon conference was by a thought leader from this huge architecture and design firm, HOK. She wrote a book, um, on neuro inclusion, she really included occupational therapy as as part of the content of the book. And there was like a case study where occupational therapist is involved. And there's a quote from Agent Ayers that says something about, says this. I can't exactly remember what the quote was, but that was really such a delight to see that. So there's already that recognition, but we're still not there yet. We really need to do more advocating, provide more experiences in the design space for our OTs, whether you're a student or new graduate or an OT professional. It is really important to have this education, this training, and just providing opportunities for us to get involved in the design space. Because if other professionals don't recognize us, it's gonna remain a challenge for us to find a job in the design industry.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And Francisco, the next question is, are there any certifications that may be helpful to pursue to boost skills in this area?
It would be an advantage if you have the typical certification in the home modification space. Right now, as far as being in the architecture design space, there is really none. There are some accessibility certifications, but it's also not a guarantee that you will get a job, because it's only as good as if the team really perceives that you're an important team member. We need you. Even if you have the necessary certification, but if you're unable to provide a portfolio on the projects that you have worked on, it's really not going to help a lot. So even if it's a small project, let's say if it's a park in your community where you live in, if you have the opportunity to get involved in the design of that space, even if it's for free, sometimes I know it's hard, but sometimes that those are the things that would really help you get recognition of the value that you can offer to the design team, these small projects, and that become a part of your portfolio. You can use that as part of your conversation with designers, that this is what you're able to do, and that would give you a much better edge.
Ingrid, I see your comment. I want to try to get through the last few questions here, and then I will certainly unmute you to share your comments for new grads. Thank you so much. Jasmine asked, do you currently present to OT students, or would you be open to sharing your work with them through a guest lecture or other form of engagement?
Yes, I have been doing guest lecturing with our partner universities such as UIC, and I also did guest lecturing for Marquette University, Duquesne University, which is also one of our partners. Is really like to share that there is this other career path, especially for those students who might really be interested in pursuing practice in design.
And Francisco, Michelle asked, how do salaries compare in this space compared to clinical roles?
It really varies. There's no set salary. So when I decided to shift careers, like honestly, I actually accepted like a cut compared to my clinical practice. But eventually, I was able to really prove that I'm able to contribute some value to the design team. It went like higher than the previous ones. And also, having the perks of being able to like work from home and be able to engage with the design community, which is really like also one of my passions.
And are there any standardized tools to access or modify architecture?
Right now, there's none. There are probably some, but because that's also one of the things that we're also developing right now for our firm is we're developing our inclusive design guidelines. And it's really great to have university partners because they can help us access some of these resources, which we can then develop and share with the design team. So right now, there are standards from the Royal Institute of British Architects as well as AA, but it's still not as how we would do it as occupational therapists. Like we can, and because I've read them, we can still do so much better.
And Melissa asks, can you share the name of the book or the author who wrote the book that mentions OT?
Let me get it right now. So this is the book.
Oh, it's blurred, Francisco.
Oh, okay. What about this?
Let's see. That is much better.
Okay.
Designing. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Very such a good read. Got a lot of insight for it. Um, yeah.
And who's the author?
The author is Kay Sargent. She's an interior designer for the architecture firm HOK.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And last question before we get to Ingrid. It says, what's one thing you wish you would have known or told yourself when transitioning from a clinical setting to the design space as an OT?
I wish I wish I attended more design events. I wish I connected with more designers early on in my career. I wish I wasn't scared to, uh, venture out of the clinical setting. But then again, no regrets. I still use my clinical knowledge when I help make the design team make decisions. So probably those are the ones. Like I wish I started early on. I think you're muted, Michael.
Sorry. I think that is all of the questions in the chat box at this time. Ingrid, I will unmute you for a few moments if you'd like to share your comments for new grads.
Sure. So I basically did this right out of the box, right out of graduating OT school. So I will be presenting as part of the AOTA entrepreneurship on actually how I did this and how I've been mentoring OTD students for probably the last 7-8 years on kind of careers out of the box. Some of them have actually been hired by park districts and other design type firms, more outdoor type stuff. But also one who was hired by a children's museum. So it's definitely a possibility. But as Francisco said, it's we need to think about how we bring ourselves to the table. It can't. There's not going to be a job out there or a job ad that says, I'm looking for an OT to help me with inclusive design for my architecture firm. It's looking at what are the positions that are there and getting yourself in the door, or volunteering initially to be part of the development of a park project in your neighborhood. I mean, neighborhood parks are, they have public meetings, and you can be that OT who says, you know what, I'm going to go in and help represent some of my families. And that's how you get introduced to a park district or a design firm and kind of show them your value. A lot of it is about showing our value and what differences we can make. But if you want to join the AOTA Entrepreneur Workshop, that's I think next Monday, right?
I believe you're
I'm
correct.
at the
Yeah,
end
I
of the
think it's
day. I'm
Monday.
like at 4:45, and I'll literally be. I mean, I created my whole inclusive design career, which I've been doing since 2002, out of a school project that was a month long. And so I'll kind of walk you through how I, developed that one little project into getting hired, proving that value in a month's time, and then also showing, going back to the question of how much was I paid. I was paid the going rate of a new grad as an OT. And I can tell you now, I probably get paid a whole lot more than most OTs do because I've been doing it for 20 years. So part of what I'll share is how you continue to show your value to, whatever, group that you're working with, whether it's an LA firm, whether you're independent, whether it's, so feel free to join us for that. And thank you,
Ingrid,
Francisco, for,
no,
bringing this
thank you for
topic to the table.
thank you for sharing that.
Because, we need, I totally agree. We need to be in this realm, and we need to be doing more than just home mods. I mean, it's important to take care of people in their homes, but people want to get out and do things in our parks. They want to do things in our museums. They want to be able to move through public spaces in a way that is empowering and enabling. And we have many things that we bring to the table, but we need to reframe how we look at what we bring to the table.
Yes, yes. Totally agree, Ingrid. Ingrid, I was just going to share. I actually connected with one of your interns. She has, I think she works for uh, a company as an inclusive designer. I think it's a playground company because
Oh,
I
so
just connect.
Ariel, yeah,
Yeah. I
So
think
at
I'm gonna have a
Landscape
conversation
Structures,
with
yeah,
her. Yeah.
yeah. So
It's
I
such a
I
small
mentored
world.
her through her capstone, and I've actually just stepped away from Landscape Structures, who we found out today made one of Forbes' new accessible 100 firms, and Landscape Structures is one of them. So after,
Wow.
and I've consulted with them for 15 years as an OT. So, there are places for us out there, but we need to show our value, and you got to figure out your way in the door, and then and that's some of what I'll share on Monday of kind of how to do that. But we are definitely needed outside the box.
Yeah, and be persistent too. Like you can't
Yes.
just do it at one time. Like you have to do it over and over and over.
Well, and one
Um,
of the things I'll talk about is, and you mentioned this too, is this piece of really being sensitive to the need of what that design firm or what the end client needs. That when you have that bid process, and you talked about, how do we help, that community understand, what does inclusion look like for them. And one of the things I did do, going back to somebody asking about possible trainings, I did actually take the certification course offered through the Rick Hansen Foundation out of Vancouver, British Columbia. So they've created kind of a tool similar to LEED certification, but around universal design. It is a college grade class. It's a year long. It is not cheap. As a US citizen, we can't sit for the certification because it's a Canadian process. But for me, the knowledge base, and I would say probably of all the different kind of assessments I've seen out there, it is probably more OT than anything I've seen out there. So, going back to, but for me, it just added like another layer of how do we look at spaces. And, we as OTs, we're working with people every day. We know what their needs are, and that ability to translate it into then what does that look like on a playground? What does that look like in a museum? What does that look like in, there's a group of OTs who have done work with theater spaces. I'm thinking of Roger out of Jefferson University. And, but the tricky part is, how do you actually do this not tied to, let's say, a university? I mean, there are a good number of OTs out there who, are university professors who are providing a lot of opportunities for students and in built environments and partnerships with architecture programs and things like that. But to actually make a living and being able to pay off your student loans and all that, so I'll share kind of how I did that on Monday.
we should see everyone for that session.
Ingrid, thank you so much. And Francisco, our last question for the evening. Melissa asked, what was your first project and how long have you been working in this space?
So the first project, I'm trying to remember because it's been a while. That would be an airport bridge. That was like I really spent time with it. I worked with my intern on how we can make recommendations to the architects. It was like they have an issue with an incline. It still meets the code standards, but they just want the passengers going through the bridge to have a much more comfortable experience. So we research on the type of flooring that needs to be used. Would there be opportunities for handrails? Would there be opportunities to have seating in the middle of the bridge? We explored the role of curves, the role of artwork, just to make that whole experience pleasant, because unfortunately we couldn't do with the incline anymore. So it's just a matter of looking at those other design features to still make that experience, to make that space supportive of the people going through that space. So it's such a small project, but that is really, I think, one of the projects where we did research and really delved into existing articles. Like, okay, how long would people want to be able to take a seat after some time, and what incline would make it a fall risk for people, and why? And because we can use that to recommend railings or bars for some people who have difficulty with balance can hang on to if they're walking like up an incline, even if it's really not that much. But some people, if you don't have good balance, if you don't have good endurance, like, you would really feel it.
Francisco, thank you so much. The last couple comments of the evening. Someone said this should be an OT practice. Approaching city/county government agencies is a great way to get into the door. Many thank yous in the chat, Francisco. Thank you so much. If anyone has any last minute questions or comments, please post it now. Otherwise, I will lead us into our closing for the evening.
And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I really like connecting with my fellow OTs.
Thank you so much, Francisco, for sharing your time and insight and experiences with us today. You've given us a compelling look at how occupational therapy can influence the built environment in meaningful and tangible ways, and how collaboration between OTs and design professionals can truly transform spaces for the better. On behalf of OT practitioners and AOTA's Home and Community Health Special Interest Section, I sincerely thank you for your leadership and for all of your meaningful contributions to our wonderful profession. You are an absolute trailblazer, an OT hero to many, including myself, and a powerful example of how our expertise can influence systems and spaces far beyond traditional practice settings. It has truly been an honor to learn from you this evening. Thank you so much. To all of our attendees, thank you for being part of this practice chat. We hope this session sparks new ideas and deepens your confidence to bring your clinical knowledge into conversations about design and accessibility. If you're interested in learning more or continuing the dialogue, we encourage you to stay engaged with AOTA's Home and Community Health Special Interest section by visiting CommunOT or checking out our brand new microsite featuring exclusive home and community health SIS-related resources, publications, and upcoming events available at hchsis.aota.org. Until next time, take care, and a heartfelt thank you again to Francisco. Everyone have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone.